Okay, so today I'm going to do a quick demonstration on how to use the more advanced features of the MIDI-PAC for MSX computers by Warp 3 and Supersonics. Now, if you're like me, most people, when you get your MIDI-PAC, the first thing you're going to do is you're just going to plug it in, connect it to whatever GM module you have, and just enjoy it. And this is good fun. But after a while, it's fun to experiment and really try out different things. Honestly speaking, you really want to think, to get the best experience with the MIDI-PAC, you really want to think on a game-per-game basis, because every game is a little different. Every game can use some tweaks, and once you kind of know what you're doing, it's a lot easier than it might appear at first. So today, we're mostly going to be focusing on the Yamaha MU2000, simply because this is not only a very good sounding module, but it's also got a nice screen. It's very easy to use, very easy to understand what you're doing. If you're using an older module, it can be a bit more of a challenge if you're not really experienced with it. But this is just a demonstration. So, first thing we're going to do is, of course, you will need to have the various config files and everything available on your MSX. I have them on an SD card. All of the programs you need, like MPCONFIG, you can get off the Warp 3 website. But yeah, the key is to know the game, know how your module works. Thankfully, with the internet, you can find manuals pretty easily for most stuff. And then just experiment. Anyway, so the first thing we're going to do, just to start fresh, I'm going to go MPC load here. And I'm just going to run gmv2.mpc. This is the default configuration for GM that actually comes with the MIDI-PAC. So now it's been reset to complete 0 status. So now we're going to turn off the MSX. And we're going to start with Valis for MSX1. Not exactly a great game, but for this kind of an experiment, it's very easy to work with. So we're just going to turn on the MSX here. And the first thing is just get familiar with what actually is happening. So Valis boots up. And if we look over to the module, let's take a look at what's actually happening now. Now I chose Valis because Valis only uses Psg. Meaning we've only got 3 channels. And on top of that, it's really simple because it uses 2 channels for the music, and the 3rd channel it saves for sound effects. So basically everything's being done on 2 channels. So if you look at the module itself, you can see the first channels are doing nothing. Channel 10 is the jazz kit, which is the default for the MIDI-PAC. But this game doesn't use drums. So we got 11, which is the square lead, 12, which is also the square lead, and 13, which is, again, the square lead, because that's what the default settings are for the Psg. Okay. So that's kind of your default setting. But we can have a lot more fun by playing with the instruments. So if I'm going to pause here and insert a direct capture of Valis running on the default square leads, just to give you a baseline of what it sounds like. Okay, so that was what Valus sounds like on the default settings on the ME2000. But let's just do something silly today. And what would Valus sound like if played on Distortion Guitar? Because everybody loves the Distortion Guitar, right? So, we're going to load up MPCONFIG here. Now, this can be a little intimidating if you don't, until you recognize what's what, but it's really not that hard. So YM2413, that's your FM. Then, of course, we've got our Psg. First, we're going to just look at MIDI settings. Now, if you go to MIDI channel mapping, this basically shows you what it's... You've got music 1 to music 9. Those are your FM channels. Then, of course, you've got 3 Psg channels, and then you've got your rhythm channel. And the default configuration is just 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3. Rhythm is, of course, on channel 10, because that's the default in the MIDI world. And then the Psgs are 11, 12, and 13. We don't need to really change these for Valus, because we're just using Psg. So, we'll go to Psg settings. Now, for Psg, is actually looks a little complicated at first, because Psg can be used as an instrument source, but also as a drum source for certain games. But Valus 1 doesn't use drums. So, instead, we're just going to use... We need to come here to the MIDI voice number. Now, basically, every voice, every instrument on your module will have a number. So, if you just look over here at the 2000 itself, I can push a little button here to switch over to guitars, and then I can just push this to kind of scroll through all of the guitar presets. So, anyway, for example, we've got General MIDI 2 version of the Distortion Guitar, and you can see it's set at 000 and 031. So what that means is we're going to come over here, and that 0001 is referring basically to our MSB and LSB. Now these are your bank selects. A lot of modules, they have multiple ROM banks, which is how the instrument samples are stored. In this case, we can just leave them set at 0. And as we just saw, the actual voice number is 31. So I'm just going to change this to 31. In fact, this even works in real time. So for example, now if I'm going to change that number to like 32, guitar, 33, acoustic bass. So I can literally just scroll through in real time. But again, 31 is our distortion guitar. Now if you look down here, it gives you the keyboard notes, so you can actually test this in real time. So for example, turn up the volume and you can see it on the module itself as well. So, now we have the MIDI-PAC set up to use the distortion guitar for the Psg channels. So, when we quit out of this, it's going to ask what we want to do. And we're going to use store new settings into MPC so that it's saved in there. Alright. Now we just exit the program. And now we need to turn off the MSX. And now we're just going to pop Valus back in. And before I turn on, let's focus to the module so you can see what's happening here. See? Reset received, distortion guitar selected. And as you can see, before it was the square lead, but now it's distortion guitar. And yes, this is playing in real time. Alright. Next I'm going to do is I'm going to insert another direct capture just so you can clearly hear what Vallis sounds like played on Distortion Guitar. Whether or not it actually fits the music or not, it's kind of irrelevant. This is just a demonstration. So, if you want to laugh, go ahead and laugh. Okay, so that's what Vallis is like on Distortion Guitar. A little shrill, but that's Vallis. So, let's do something more interesting, though. Let's take Alesta, which of course uses FM. So we're going to reset the MIDI-PAC. Oops. That's not what I wanted. So, once again, we're going to reset, just for consistency. Okay, and go to MPCONFIG. Now, this uses FM, so first, just to give you an example, we're going to go to the voice settings. And here, it's got what all the instruments are set to. So, for example, violin. Guitar. Piano. And of course, you can use the numbers just like we did with the Psg before to set them however you want. So you can often find a more suiting instrument for a particular game. So we're just going to turn this off. We're going to put in Vallis, or Alesta. There. Boot up here. And just to take a look. So, since this uses the FM, one is the trumpet, two is synth brass, etc. And this uses drums, which is set to the jazz kit. Anyway, I'm just gonna turn that off for a minute. Stop playing. And like before, I'm going to cut here and just play a minute of Alesta running on the default GM setup on this module. Okay, so yeah, that was Alesta running on the default settings on the MIDI-PAC. But let's have some fun. Oops, not it. I want MPCONFIG. So, if you watch some of my videos, you might know my particular MU2000, I have a Yamaha Plug 150 series DR, which is a drum add-on board, which has some really awesome drum sets on it. And especially if you really just want to give your music kind of a kick in the ass, playing around with different drum kits is one of the easiest ways to do it. You can really change the tone just by subbing in a drum kit. So, I want to use the drum kit on the plug board. Now, of course, the MIDI-PAC doesn't know what that is, but we can program the MIDI-PAC. So the first thing we're going to need to do here is go to Midi Settings. Midi Reset string. Now, over here, you'll see this hexadecimal code F07E7F0901F7. This is your basic general MIDI reset message. And this is, and you can see 151 milliseconds after the unit turns on, it sends the message, and this tells the MU2000 to go into standard GM mode. But to use the drum board, we need to be in XG mode. So the first thing I'm going to do, MU2000 is actually a very fast module, so we don't need to wait that long. So I'm going to change this just to 1 millisecond. So it'll basically send the reset message right after it boots. Now we need to edit our string though. Now F0 actually marks the start of an exclusive message. But if you don't know what to do, just look on the internet and you can see to activate the XG system. So F0 as always, then we need to move this to 4-3. 1-0. This number here is actually the device ID, but that's not such a big deal. We'll just move it to 1-0. And we need 4C. 0-0. 0-0 again. 7E. 0-0. And F7, which actually marks the end of the string. Now we need to make our string long enough. You want to do this so that it doesn't send junk data. But basically, F0431044C00007E00F7 will tell the MU2000 to enter XG mode. So now, just to see that this works, when I quit out of this, it's going to ask me if I want to save the settings, and I click yes, and you notice the XG logo popped up, which means it worked. Now, the MIDI-PAC will tell the MU2000 to enter proper XG mode, and not just standard GM mode. Sorry about that. But of course, that doesn't really mean much if we don't change anything. But in this case, we're going to use the drum board. So how do you do that? Well, on the real module, by itself, you just go to plug, enter, plug DR, assign it to part 10, because that's the drum part. And if I push enter twice, it's actually really easy. That's why I chose this module, because it gives me the code right there. To set the plug board to channel 10, we need this code. So going back over here again. Hope the pans don't make you guys sick, but it's kind of necessary. And we're going to Midi Settings, and this time Midi Custom String. Now here we can enter as much SysX as we want. So now obviously we need to enter XG system before we turn on the drum board. So we're going to set that to 5 milliseconds. Just to be safe. Honestly, 3 is good enough, but we'll go with 5. Now, we already know over here what the code is, so bear with me here. F0, 4-3, 1-0, 4C, 7-0, 0-5, 0-0, 0-9, and F7. Alright. Now, the more you know your module, the more you do this, you tend to remember stuff. Like I can tell you the 0-5 is the designation of the plug board itself. And 0-9 is telling the module to put it on channel 10. Remember, this is hexadecimal. But anyway, that should be the code, which is really easy on this module again. And this will tell it to actually set up the drum board. Okay. Quit out of this, save. Alright. But we still need to do a little more work, because you'll notice it's still set to the jazz kit. The plug board is available, but we still have to change the actual drum kit instrument mapping. So, if we come over here, and we're just going to go down to MIDI settings again, actually, and MIDI additional settings. And down here at the bottom, we have our default drum kit. Now again, you need to know the numbers, but I can tell you offhand that in this case, we need to set our MSB major select bank to 79. And our default drum voice to 0. And then the actual, today I'm going to use the rock standard 2, which is actually number 6. So now we have 6, 79, and 0. We should be able to go out of this, and let's just take a look at the module and see what it does. Store. There we go. Now as you can see, we're set to the drum board, and that's rock stand 2. The drum board has a ton of different things to play with, but okay. And then just to give you a test, we can go over to the FM drum settings. And here, you can actually individually set the different drum instruments. So just for example, we got our hi-hat, cymbal, tom-tom, snare, bass. You can change these, which we'll actually do later. But for the rock stand 2, we're set up good to go. So now we just need to exit program. Alright, now I just need to turn off. Put Alesta back in. And let's just start the module. And now let's see what happens. So as you can see, we got our rock stand 2. And now as you can see, it's using my drum add-on board on the rock stand 2 to pump. But just like before, I'm going to pause here and insert a direct capture just so you can hear what it sounds like, and a direct recording with the drum board as opposed to previous with the normal GM jazz kit. Everyone's got their own tastes, but I really like giving those drums an extra bit of punch, especially for that game. Alright, so finally, let's just do one thing a little crazy, just to show you more complicated stuff. And for that, we're actually going to switch over to the Roland Cm64. Which, if you don't know your modules, it's basically an MT32 and a CM32P, which is a PCM-based module, literally sandwiched together. There's basically two PCBs in there, and they're connected via MIDI through. Love this module, and to have some fun with it, we're going to use the SNU 11010 Rock Drums card. Now, not a whole lot of people have the hardware to do this, but I love this card. Great fun. Okay. And then we just need to switch you on. Now, just to save some time, I'm going to just load my config file that I've already saved, so I can just show you what's different. So we're going to go down and see load again, and I want to load my Cm64 rockdrum.mpc. Alright, now this is where things get more complicated, because we don't have a string, we don't have a screen on our module, and as I said, we basically have two modules in one here. So first, let's just go to MIDI Settings. Now, for MIDI Reset, you notice I've set it to nothing. The reason for that is because I don't really need it. I don't want to send a GM reset because the CM64 doesn't know what that is. It doesn't support GM. So I'm just leaving this blank, so when you turn on the module, it just boots up in its default setting. So all of its patches are completely default. No changes. And again, our custom reset string also is nothing. Now first, we're going to need to look at our MIDI channel mapping. And this is where things get a little tricky. Because if you're familiar with the MT32, you can't actually play anything on channel 1. Come on, focus. Now first, before I continue, I want to say thank you. If you go on the Warp Free site, there's an actual MT32 MPC file you can download. It's actually for the original MIDI-PAC, not the MIDI-PAC2, which you can't even buy anymore. But I actually based this, basically what I did is, to save myself some time, I took that original MPC file that a very cool person made, and essentially used it as a base to add on the CM64 add-ons parts to make this work. So, whoever made that MT32 MPC file all those years ago, thank you very much. It saved me a lot of time. It sounds great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, going back. So, since the MT32 does not have, basically you don't send instrument data on channel 1, you'll see that music 1 is set up to channel 2. Music channel 2 to 3, to 4, to 5, 6, 7, 8. And you'll notice I have 8 and 9 both set to channel 9. There's a reason for that. Now, the PSGs are 11, 12, 13. So you might be asking, well, why don't you just use the PSGs for those additional channels? Because this is basically two modules. The CM64 is basically two modules in one. And so what that means is that if I send music to one of the lower channels, it goes to the MT32 part. If I send it to the higher channels, it goes to the CM32P part. So, and the instruments are different. So for example, the 32P has a very beautiful piano that the MT32 doesn't have, but if the game sends that piano to, for example, music 1, then music 1 would need to set down to one of the higher channels because it doesn't exist in the MT32, and the actual instrument numbers that we've been changing are different. So this is where things get a little complicated. But again, the key is knowing how your modules work. And so you can see here, now the normal MT32 drums, the rhythm, is actually on channel 10. But we're not using those. We're using the drum card. And to make that work on the Cm64, you have to set the drums to any of the PCM channels. So that's 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So as you see here, I have it set to 16. Okay. Now that that's set, we just go to our additional settings, and we go down to our drums. Now, default drum voice is 65. How do I know that? Well, if you look up on the internet, you'll find out that on the drum card, program 65 is for the rock drum kit, and program 66 is actually for the electric drum kit, which are the two drum kits included on the PCM card itself. So, thanks to the internet, I know to use the drum card. We want to set the 65 for the rock drum program, and then MSB and LSB both set to 0. So now if I go to my drum settings, now what you're hearing is, this is the hi-hat, simple. Tom-tom. Now, if you're familiar with the MT32 drum sounds, these sound a hell of a lot better. So, as you can see, I've got that set up. So, the last part of this video, just to give you a demonstration, I'm going to now run a Lesta on the Cm64 using the using the rock drum PCM card instead of the MT32 drums. But for simplicity, the rest of the music is still just the basic MT32. So the only difference between running this on an MT32 and this configuration is going to be the drums. And that's going to be in the video, but just as a final thought, I am going to upload all of these MPC files that I've made, just to share them around, give you something to start with, test them out. I will say the Cm64 rock drum setup, the compatibility is very, very low. It sounds great with a Lesta, but not much else at this point without really going into different instruments and setting things up differently. But either way, it's fun. Hope you enjoy it, and I hope this video was useful. Enjoy your MIDI-PACs. Have fun.
Thank